Okay, so once again, apologies for my absence today. COVID refuses to leave me and let me get on with things. So today's lesson, we're going to look at the last part of working with quadratic equations. Okay, now earlier this week or last, we looked at how we could use graphs to solve quadratic equations, where we were plotting that U-shaped graph and finding where it crossed the x-axis and reading off those values. Of course, we started with quadratic equations by moving from factorizing a quadratic. So just to remind you that quadratic expression is one that contains an x squared term, an x term and a number that we can write equals to 0. I guess it doesn't have to be an x, it could be any letter, so it could be p squared minus a p term plus a number, but generally you come across them with x's. So when we were dealing with this previously up to grade B, the first thing we would have to do is to factorize it to get it into these double bracket forms, and that just reminds you there of the method we were using to do that. We'd multiply the number in front of the x squared by the number only, and we'd write down the factor pairs that make 24 and look to see which factor pair we could manipulate with pluses and minuses to make minus 25. So for 24 that would be minus 1 and minus 24. We'd rewrite the x term using that factor pair, and then first of all look for a common factor in the 6x squared minus 1x, which would be x, leaving 6x minus 1 in brackets. We then move our attention to the second pair of digits, and we know that whatever's in that brackets has to be repeated here. So you're then working out, right, well, what can I take out of that pair as a common factor, which will produce that. So 4 comes out, and in order to make the signs correct there, that would have to be negative. So minus 4 times 6x is minus 24x. 4 times 1 is 4, minus times a minus is a plus. We then pull out that repeated factor, and that remains for the second bracket the x from that part and the minus 4 from that part. So that's the grade B factorization. And then if it's an equation that is equal to 0, that means that the contents of this bracket must equal 0. So either 6x minus 1 is 0, solve that equation to get x, and x is 1 over 6, or the contents of this bracket must be 0. So x minus 4 equals 0, well, x equals 4 would make that bracket 0. So generally with a quadratic equation, you will get 2 solutions that you have to state and find. So that's the factorization method. We've looked at the graphical method. What we're going to look at this morning is using the quadratic equation formula. Okay, now this might look a little bit terrifying when you see it straight up. However, it is given to you. Okay, so this will be on a paper 2. So this is the front page of a paper 2, and then the next page is a list of formulas that you were given. Okay, now the 2 formulas that you need to be most familiar with for our purposes are that one, the area of trapezium, which we don't need for today's lesson, but it is one that you do need to know. But here is the one that you can refer to in the exam. Okay, so the quadratic equation, the solutions of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not equal to 0, is given by x equals, and then you can see the formula there. So you just need to know it's there when you come across the question, and there will be one where they want you to use that. Okay, so let's have a practice. So the clue with these questions, Neve, you always ask me, how do I know that this is what I need to do? Any question where it's a quadratic equation that they expect you to use the formula to solve, they will give you a degree of accuracy. So it will say, giving your solutions correct to 2 decimal places, 1, 3 significant figures, whatever. Okay, so this first example, it's already in the right format, okay? It has to be in the format ax squared plus bx plus c. So in this case, this is the a value, this is the b value, and this is the c value. And whatever the sign is in front comes with that constant. Okay, so a will be 3, b will be positive 2, and c will be negative 4. And then what we have to do is place those values into that quadratic equation formula. So x equals minus b, so the minus is part of the formula, and then we put in to brackets, just like we would do with trial and improvement. If we're replacing the letter with a number, stick it in brackets for safety. And then we've got this strange thing that you wouldn't have come across before, where you've got 2 signs, one on top of the other, plus or minus. And that's because, just like here, we need to end up with 2 different values for x, the either or. And that would be generated by first of all working out what the solution would be with an add there, and then secondly what the solution would be with a subtract there. So plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So 4 times the value of a times the value of c, which is negative 4. All over 2a. Okay, so the first mark is just for correctly substituting those values in like that. Now let's do some tidying up. So with this first part here, I've got a negative out and a positive in. So negative times a positive. The signs are different. The answer is negative. So that's going to be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared. 2 2s are 4. Minus 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 4 is 36. And I got a plus times a plus, which is a plus, times a minus is going to make that negative. So I got 4 take away minus 36 all over 2 times 3, which is 6. Now let's keep working with simplifying what's inside that square root sign there. I get a 4 and then I get a minus minus, which is going to make that plus 36, all divided by 6. Tidy that up further. 4 plus 36 is 40, all divided by 6. Now that is as far as I can go tidying that up as I go along. There's no further simplification I can do there. So at this point now is where I break out into the either and the or. So either x equals negative 2 plus the square root of 40 all divided by 6. And then I can go onto my calculator and work out what that is. So use your fraction button. On the top I got negative 2. The negative button is the one that my pen is pointing to there. It's not that one over there, which is a subtract. So negative 2 plus the square root of 40 all over 6 equals. And then what I suggest you do here now is, although we're going to round it to 2 decimal places, before we do that, write out the decimal string beyond that. So 7207 5 dot dot dot. Just in case you make a mistake with your rounding. And then round it. So that will be to 2 decimal places. Decimal places you start counting after the decimal point. So that's the first, that's the second. You look at the next, it's less than 5, so that would be 0.72 to 2 dp. So there's our first solution. Then for our second solution, so or, we go back to this, and now we run it with the minus instead of the plus. So that would be minus 2 take away the square root of 40 all over 6. You don't need to retype that into your calculator, because you can just use the cursor buttons to move up through your expression and press delete and change that to the takeaway. And you will get a negative. They're not always both positive. Sorry, they're not always one positive, one negative. They could both be positive, they could both be negative. So minus 1.38, oops, 742 dot dot dot, and to 2 decimal places that would be 1.39, minus 1.39 to 2 decimal places. And that's it, and that would be probably worth about 4 marks on an exam paper. Sometimes the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 isn't obvious. Sometimes you've got to do a bit of work to get there. So EG2, solve 2x bracket 2x minus 1 equals 3, giving your answer to correct as 3 significant figures. So because it's not, if that was equals 0 there, then you could say either that equals 0 or that equals 0. But because it's equal to 3, you can't do that. You've got to form the quadratic. And because it's a trigger there that I need to round it, I know that the work I'm going to have to do is using the formula. So let's rearrange this to get in the form need in form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So if I multiply out the bracket, I'm going to have 2x times 2x is 4x squared, and then I'm going to have 2x minus 1 is minus 2x equals 3. So I've got my x squared term, I've got my x term, but I haven't got the equals 0. So to get the equals 0, I need to take 3 off there and take 3 off there as well. So I get 4x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. So that now gives me the right form where a is 4, b is negative 2, and c is negative 3. So now I'm going to substitute that into my formula. So now x equals minus b, so this time it'll be minus minus 2. I just, hang on, get the formula back up for you. When I was in school, it was something we had to learn because you weren't given it, which is why I can just remember it. So minus b would be minus minus 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 2 squared minus 4ac, 4 times 4 times 3, negative 3, all over 2a. So let's do our housekeeping. So x equals minus minus makes it a plus, so it'll be 4, plus or minus the square root. Minus 2 squared is minus 2 times minus 2, which is plus 4, minus, I got 4 3s are 12, 12 4 is a 48, and that's a negative 48. All over 2 times 4, which is 8. So if I split the page and come up here, x will equal 4 plus or minus the square root, minus minus makes a plus, of 4 plus 48 all over 8. X equals 4 plus or minus 52 all divided by 8. So that's as far as I can get without splitting up the plus and minus. So I say either x equals 4 plus the square root of 52 all over 8. Okay, so cancel that one. Fraction button. 4 plus square root 52 all over 8 equals 1.4013 dot dot dot. Now for 3 significant figures, you start counting straight away at the most significant digit, which in this case is 1. So 3 significant figures will be 1.40. So that's one solution. Or x will equal 4 minus the square root of 52 all divided by 8. So go back onto your calculator, shift through where you want it to be, delete, take away, minus 0.4013 dot dot dot, and this to 3 significant figures. There's no value in there, so the first one will be the 4, so it will be 0.401 to 3 significant figures. So those are the 2 solutions for that quadratic equation. And then the last evil thing that they can do is to give you a context. So shown is a triangle with an area of 19 square centimeters. So I know the area is 19, and I know the base is x plus 6, and the perpendicular height is x plus 5. Now you're not given the formula for the area of a triangle, you're expected to know it. The area will be half times the base times the perpendicular height. So in my case, that means that half that times that must equal 19. So half times x plus 5 times x plus 6 must equal 19. That's the base, that's the height. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of the fraction by multiplying by 2. So if I multiply by 2, that will go, and that will be 19 times 2, which is 38. Okay, I can't say either that equals 0 or that equals 0, because it doesn't equal 0, and the rule doesn't apply. I can't say either that must equal 38 or that must equal 38. That property only applies to if that equals 0. So I've got to expand this out, create a quadratic, and then use the formula. So using FOIL, I got x times x is x squared, x times 6 plus 6x, 5 times x plus 5x, 5 times 6 plus 30, because they're both positive, equals 38. Now I've got to get rid of the 38 because it needs to be equal to 0, so I need to subtract 38 from each side, and that will then leave me x squared. I got 6x plus 5x, which I can simplify to 11x. 30 take away 38 is negative 8 equals 0. So a will be the number in front of the x squared, which is 1. B will be 11. And C will be negative 8. So in my formula, x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 8, all over 2 times a. So that's the first job. Remember, you get the mark for substituting correctly into the formula. So don't make any risks starting to simplify until you've done that. Now we tidy up. Minus times plus, that's going to be negative 11, plus or minus the square root. 11 squared is 121, and then I go 4 times 1 is 4, 4 eighths are 32, minus times a minus is plus, so that all simplifies to plus 32. Now I've done that in one shorter step than I had in the previous examples. So if you want to put an extra step in there and do the minus bracket minus 32, that's absolutely fine. 2 times 1 is 2. X equals minus 11 plus or minus the square root of 143. Okay, so 121, sorry it's not, it's 153. All over 2. Right, let's just, to make sure I haven't mucked up my example here, in my COVID brain, 153. So that's as far as I can get. So now I break it up with the either. X equals minus 11 plus the square root of 153 over 2. Cancel fraction button. Minus 11 plus the square root of 153 divided by 2 equals, and this doesn't say actually with this question, so I'm going to go 2 decimal places, equals 0.682 dp, or x equals minus 11 minus the square root of 153 all over 2. So back up using my cursor. Minus 11.682 dp. So those are the two possible solutions. Now the one extra step that we have to take when the equation comes from a context is to look at those and consider if both of those are possible. Now because the context is measuring a length, it's not possible to have a negative length. So even though my quadratic equation's got two solutions, in the context of the question, where you can't have a negative length, in context, negative length impossible. So x equals 0.68. So if they give you a context, in particular if it's related to a dimensional length, or it could be a time can't be negative, and that then eliminates one of the possible solutions. Okay, so that is solving quadratic equations using a scientific, using the formula. What I want you to have a go at now are the 5 examples that I've added to the sheet. So they're taken off a Corbett Maths question, which is why I've just got numbers 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. numerical answers are there for you to check. I'll keep working through them on the video clip, but I'll do it quite quickly and quietly. So if the cover supervisor pauses now and you crack on with it, and then if you need to watch any of them later, you can. Good luck, guys. Okay, so with this one, A is 4, B is 1, and C is -7, because that would have a +1 in front of it. So x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. X equals, so that would be -1 plus or minus 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is 1. This is going to be plus, because you've got a minus times a minus, and then 16 times 7 is 112. All divided by 8. So x equals -1 plus or minus the square root of 113, all divided by 8. So that's as far as I can go without breaking into either or. So either x equals -1 plus the square root of 113 over 8. We're looking for 2 decimal places. Square root -1 plus square root 113 all over 8. So that's going to be 1.2037 dot 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 equals 1.20 2 dp, or x equals -1 minus 113 all over 8. Should be minus 1.4537 dot 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 minus 1.45 dp. 1.20 minus 1.45. Okay, with this one, 2 decimal places. It looks like one you can factorize, but the trigger for the formula is there. So A will be 1, B will be -2, and C will be -9. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. X equals minus times a minus makes it +2. That will be 4, and that will be plus 36. 4 times 1 is 4, times 9, 36, all over 2. So x would be 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 2. So either x equals 2 plus the square root of 40 all over 2, fraction 2 plus square root of 40 all over 2, 4.16. dp or x will be 2 minus root 40 all over 2. Should be minus 2.16. So either x equals 4.16 or 2.16. 4.16 minus 2.16. This one, A is 7, B is minus 25, and c is 2. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, 25 squared, 625, minus 4 times 7 times 2, 56. And it's a minus because that's all multiplies to be positive. Positive times negative is negative, all over 14. X equals 25 plus or minus the square root of 625 minus 56, 569, all over 14. Can't go any further. Either x equals 25 plus 569 over 14, 2 decimal places. So just to speed things up, I'm just going to write it down because I'm fairly confident I'm right. But stick with what I said in the exam. I'll write the string down beyond it. So 25 plus the square root of 569 over 14 is 3.49. To 2 decimal places. Or x is 25 minus 569 over 14. Back into my formula, delete minus equals. I messed that up, haven't I? 569 delete 25 minus the square root of 569 over 14. Better. It's 2 decimal places, 0.08. 3.49, 0.08. A couple more. So with this one we can see it's not equal to 0, so I have to take the 7 off both sides in order to make it equal 0, and that will give me 3x squared plus 10x minus 2 equals 0. So A is 3, B is 10, C is minus 2. X equals minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Minus 10 plus or minus 100 plus 24 all over 6. Minus 10 plus minus 124 all over 6. Now I'm going to break it up. So either x equals minus 10 plus 124 square rooted over 6. Fraction button. Negative 10 plus square root 124 over 6 equals 0.19 to 2. Or x equals minus 10 minus the square root of 124 all over 6. Oops. Minus 10 minus the square root of 124 all over 6 minus 3.52 to to 2 decimal places. 0.19 minus 3.52. And then the last one, again, I've got to rearrange that. I've got to add 2x to each side and then take 7 off each side. So you're going to end up with 11x squared plus 2x, add 2x to each side, minus 7 equals 0. So that's your starting point. A is 11, B is 2, C is minus 7. X equals minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. X equals minus 2 plus or minus 4 plus 4 times 11 times 7, 308 all over 22. 312 all over 22. Either x equals minus 2 plus 312 over 22. Fraction negative 2 plus root 312 underneath 22 equals 0.2 decimal places 71, or x is minus 2 minus 312 rooted over 22. Back into our formula, replace the plus with a minus, minus 0.89. So x is 0.71 or minus 0.89. Okay, so that's a grade A quadratic equation question that hopefully you can be confident of scoring good marks on. So that's it for this lesson. Catch up with you again tomorrow.